A very important exercise, an exercise that could have a defining influence on the future of our country. And I know that one day may not be enough for all of the ideas to be expressed and collated and then fully reflected in a single document. But I want you to recall that we've not been new at this exercise. Our engagement of the wider society in a more structured way, even in government, has over the years we've been in office impregnated and heavily influenced our programs that we've implemented thus far. And with all of our mistakes, we have transformed Guyana from a poor country, now classified as a middle-income country without oil, from a bankrupt country that used to use 153% of its revenue to service debt, now to a country that is solvent, that uses 6% at this stage of its revenue to service debt, where we have resources in the central bank fastly being diminished under this government, but at least we have resources there, and most of the macro fundamentals are stable. And so a lot of that history has come about largely because of the nature of the policies we have practiced and how we have gone about this. You see that document? Could you just hold that up? That's just one volume of the National Development Strategy. There are 6 volumes that in the National Development Strategy that through a consultative process between 95 and 96, we came up with and generated that document. And if you have a chance to go back to the document, you would see that much of what has been implemented and much of what is yet to be implemented are reflected there. For example, a high-span bridge across the Demerara Harbor, the Demerara River at the current location is one of the things reflected there. Extended the road from Parika all the way to Bartica, which this government just announced without any money available for it. They just announced it. That's part of that document too. So, and it's probably over 3,000 pages long. And that has been reinforced through several other participatory processes that led to the creation of other strategies. For example, the poverty reduction strategy, the national competitiveness strategy that Irfan mentioned, and the low carbon development strategy. And when I met with the Civil Society Forum a couple of years ago, I had to point out that even in the implementation of the low carbon development strategy, we had stakeholders, almost all the stakeholder groups represented here. The private sector, the labor movement, the miners, people in the forestry sector, women, young people, indigenous people, everyone was represented here at a monthly meeting with the president that was chaired by the president that lasted, in fact, it's over 130 something of those meetings that took place, and which was discontinued by this government. So our track record at listening and engaging is solid. It may need to be improved. But this process here may be the first time we're doing it before our manifesto is being crafted. But in government, we have done this, and with results that you can point to. There's not been a single participatory strategy done by this government so far. And that is why it is so lost. It is so lost. So I just want to say to you that we're going to have hundreds of ideas coming in. And there will be a litmus test. As chairman of the manifesto committee, I'm making clear that nothing gets into our manifesto that we can't fund, because we're not going to do like APNU and make all sorts of promises to people just to get their votes, and then you cannot deliver this. That it must be realistically costed and that it could be deliverable. That is for the economic type things that cost money. On the governance side, that's very different. And so that will be the litmus test for ideas getting into the manifesto. So you're going to have hundreds of ideas coming forward, but no use we reflect everything because of the stage where we are. They may be relevant for a longer term vision as we become wealthier as a country. Two, we would like to move people away from this anecdotal relationship to policy making and policies, and to hold politicians accountable for what they say. For example, again, we open the newspapers and we see Minister Patterson promising $4 billion for the airport today in Lethem. And this airport here, they've changed the entire design of the airport. They argue that it was a corrupt project, but now they've increased the cost, changed the entire design where this airport is a shadow of itself. There are 7 promises made for large-scale infrastructure in this budget, the 2019 budget, that have no source of funding identified as yet. Absolutely none. They've promised to pave the road from Linden to Kurupukari, to Mabura Hill, and to build a bridge across the Kurupukari 2 years ago. And it's supposed to be funded by a British grant, and the feasibility study has not been done to see if they're eligible for the grant for that road as yet, because you have to, the study has to show a 12% rate of return on the project. This is the kind of anecdotal policy making that we have. That's why we're drifting today. A PPP government will never do that sort of thing. If we make a promise, it means that we know where the money is coming from and how we'll fund this. So when we talk about 50,000 jobs, we've already identified which sectors they're going to come from, what are the policy making and what will be the policy making environment that would allow the private sector to create those jobs, how many can come from government itself by a reorientation of this budget, which has a ton of wasteful expenditure. We have been in the public domain as saying that we can take this budget, cut $30 billion out of it without harming development objectives or the welfare of our people. That's how much fat we believe is in the budget. Unnecessary expenditure. With that alone, you can give back the incentives to the private sector. So people keep asking if you're, and I want for full disclosure, we've already made, we put out a flyer, your friend mentioned this, we're making 37 promises already to people. And I hope that you get a copy of this so when you're discussing, you will see what they are. We've been saying some of these things right at the beginning. Like for example, reversing the taxes on machinery and equipment, the VAT, on restoring the pensioners' money subsidy, or the 10,000 grant for the school kids and stuff. You'd see them reflected here later. But those have to be costed. And you have $88 billion, as therefore pointed out, increase in taxes per annum. So if you do this, you're gonna shrink that. Would that mean the fiscal deficit would expand and put more pressure on the exchange rate? No, because the answer is that there could be expenditure that you could easily cut or reorient in this budget, where you do not need to alter the size of the fiscal deficit, but simply reorient expenditure. So the tax cuts that we're offering to go back to status quo ante, when we had an environment that was favorable for private sector growth and for expanding welfare, those tax cuts can be funded even from the same budget, the budgets passed by APNU. And so those are vital things for us, and moving away from anecdotal policy making. So what are the big things here today? Oil and gas. And we'd have a huge challenge of managing this economy with oil and gas proceeds. Often it's seen as a blessing, but it could also kill your economy. And most people are aware of the Dutch disease and how that happens by changing relative prices. Most people say, we haven't received the oil money from Exxon as yet, but we already have the symptoms of the Dutch disease because all the other sectors are in doldrum or they're dying. But that would be a huge challenge. But also, realism is vital too. You know, people love when you make lofty promises, but realism about what we will face is also important, because the oil and gas money will not be a large sum of money when you look at it in terms of the size of the budget, etc. In the initial years, and already this government has hollowed out the economy so that you could have, you may need to spend those resources almost immediately. I was saying to someone a few days ago that this government made one decision, and we don't know how they made that decision as yet, but that decision could be expose us to at least $60 billion of liabilities because of the lawsuit that one company filed. If they get that judgment against the government, that's 1 year of oil money. This government, to clear the overdraft alone at the central bank that this government has accrued, that's 2 years of oil money. 3 years of the oil money gone, the first 3 years. In the meantime, we're not getting large numbers of jobs from the sector, and so we have to have a realistic picture of how oil resources must be integrated. But all is not lost. You can have with a clearer definition, as Irfan said, of the framework, and we have been very clear about that. With the framework, then you can do much more. And let me tell you one thing, because we've been in the public domain and speaking about the Sovereign Wealth Fund, about bidding for future contracts, about getting a regulatory agency staffed by technical people. But one thing on local content, we'll make sure, with better contract administration, that Guyanese actually can benefit from the opportunities there, that they're not just somebody on paper. This government has abandoned Guyanese. And we will never allow Guyanese to become second-class citizens in Guyana. I've seen it happen in other countries where we produce oil, that they produce oil. And I heard recently that at one school in Georgetown, they changed the entrance fee to $18,000 US. So a lot of the local Guyanese kids now, their parents may not be able to send them there. And this, more and more people who are working in that sector, because they may get a free grant for school kids, funded from Cost Oil, they will be able to afford it. But Guyanese kids would not be able to afford to go to that institution. We as a country, all of us together, have to ensure that the people who come here and invest, that they're treated well, they make money, the oil companies, but that the hog share of the wealth come to our people. And that in that process, we're not treated as second class. We have already raised some issues, Irfan and I, like local contractors. Local contractors, some of the companies they take 90 days to pay their contractors. The local guys don't have that deep pocket. It affects their cash flow. if you want to really make local opportunities real, you have to have a different payment scheme for those Guyanese or contracts below a certain level so that they could actually work. Secondly, mobilization advances are not being paid. So the bigger companies can afford this, but small companies, the ones from abroad. These are real things that we have to discuss. Hopefully you get suggestions today, really practical suggestions, which don't require any renegotiation of the contract, but clear government direction to the company and standing up for Guyanese, which our government doesn't seem to be doing. That is what it requires, and that is what you'll get from the PPP in the oil and gas sector. So today, we're hoping to advance that discussion. Irfan mentioned constitutional reform, and we've made it clear publicly, the party has done, that we will not make a specific promise on constitutional reform. We can't sit here as individuals and say, this is what we want. Because the people, we can say it, but it has to be tested by the people of this country. The Constitution belongs to the people of Guyana. And therefore, what we will promise is a process like we had before we made the far-reaching changes in the Constitution. We have probably the most progressive Constitution in this hemisphere, and one of the most progressive in the world if people take time to read it and the features there, much of which have not been implemented or been implemented in the breach or direct violation, like what the president has been doing, direct violation of our Constitution. But we will promise, before we engage in that process, we had a committee where 10 members came from civil society, and 5 from the government and 5 from the opposition. And that led the process, a broad-based process, to go across the country and listen to our people. And that is what we will promise again, that we will work with civil society to see what changes our people want. If they believe that they need further changes in the Constitution, we will support them, that. But it must undergo the litmus test of people's participation and broad-based consultation. The role for civil society, the private sector. Clearly, a lot of our members here have been speaking about Article 13 of the Constitution, when the Constitution was changed to give effect to that. And I had to point out to several members of the Civil Society Forum how we really effected it in many ways through the Stakeholders Forum that often the president chair, but Gail Teixeira was heading many times, which involved everyone. That led to the creation of the IRO. That led to private sector having 3 members on the board, the privatization board. Not the private sector, but civil society. A member from the labor movement, member from the private sector, and 1 from consumer affairs. This government now bypasses the privatization board. I don't think it's even in existence now. And it goes straight to the cabinet, everything. But that was a reflection of involvement of civil society. So we will have to see how we can play a greater role in giving effect to Article 13 of our Constitution. On the private sector, we can make one promise to you, because there are lots of things that will come up today. But we'll create the environment to ensure that if you invest, that you get a decent return on your investment, that you're not harassed by GRA or the other agencies, that the state agencies, that they play the role of facilitator for development, not see you as a source only of taxes, because it seems as though that is what this government is doing. On ethnic security, very important for us too. Every Guyanese must feel that our government in the future, whether they support us or not, although we'd like everybody to support us, and we'll work hard to do that in every part of the country. We don't only work in the PPP strongholds. But that they feel that they are part of this vision for the future, and that they and their children can benefit from all that is coming our way in the future, that regardless of their race or their religion. Our party has made it clear that we want to work hard to change the face of our party, because we have suffered from stereotypes about the PPP all along, that we're an Indian party, but we have a large presence in the Indo-Guyanese community and the Amerindian community, and we're working very hard. And when people come in and they see us and they see our hearts and our policies, then they will see that we've always worked for and we will always work for Guyana. That's the People's Progressive Party. And that has always been our vision. From the time we were established by Chetty Jagan at independence, to fight for independence, to today. That's a core value of the PPP. The moment we depart from that, we're not the PPP of Chetty Jagan any longer. The other things are local government, decentralization, giving more powers to people on the ground in a greater way, but financial powers, all of these issues. I do not want to go on for very long because you're going to have the discussions. I just wanted to say the growth frontiers. We had 6 or 7 sectors. If we had nurtured them well. You have that, the manifesto there? Oh no, I have it here. Yeah, we have 6 or 7 sectors. If you had nurtured them well, you would have seen each could have been just as lucrative, at least in the initial years, as the oil and gas sector, creating more jobs and an income for Guyanese people. And we'll return to that broad-based vision. Oil and gas resources must be used to improve our economy, the rest of the economy. So when the resources, and these are depleting resources, when they're gone, we have a thriving Guyana and a Guyana that has many sectors. The economy is diversified. It must be used for welfare purposes too. So today we can go back to some of those sectors that have the potential of generating thousands of jobs, because oil and gas is capital intensive. We need the labor intensive sectors to do that. But if you look at this, go to the manifesto, the last one, and look at this here. It tells you exactly how. Economic growth, what are the transformative infrastructure to support that growth? So when you saw the airport being built, it was not being built just because we want a spanking new structure. But the airport was built to support tourism, and secondly, to create a hub here that in itself would have generated more jobs. And thirdly, with a bigger runway, you could have had the airlines coming here, larger aircrafts that would have reduced the cost of freight for our non-traditional exports. That would be a big boost to our non-traditional export. So you take it down from 70 cents, 80 cents to 30 cents. You can then compete with DR and Jamaica to send our pumpkin or whatever else to New York. That is, every single infrastructure project had a philosophical underpinning why we were pursuing it. It was supporting a strategy. East Bank Road, everything else, the Marriott Hotel. And we need to get back to that, and so people can understand that. So I would urge you to have a look at this flow chart that we had established here, how things are linked. Everything was linked, and so there was no room for that. So I just wanted to share these few ideas with you, that we're here on the 3 themes: economic growth, enhancing the well-being of Guyanese, and governance. Within those, there are broad scope for all of our views to be reflected, the working groups, and I hope that you see this not just at the end in this process, but also as the beginning of a broader partnership. As Irfan pointed out, our party has said we want a big tent approach, where we create the conditions in the future for people to not just generate ideas, but to be part of their implementation. Our country requires this now. And even we have held out even a hand to the other political parties, because we have to find some way of working together for the sake of Guyana in the future. We have to do that. But right now, there are no interlocutor. But it must be on the basis of some basic principles. Respect for Constitution, rule of law, that our primary purpose in government is not to collect taxes or build arches or those things, or buy vehicles for government ministers. Our primary purpose in government is to serve people, to ensure they are working, they can feed their family, send their children to school. That is what, and keeping them safe in their homes and ensure that we protect our sovereignty. Thank you very much.